Welcome to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, it's good to be back with you once again. We are in the midst of, well, at least for some teams and some fan bases right now, is one of the most exciting parts of the baseball calendar. But if you're a Braves fan covering the Braves or a member of the Braves franchise, things are pretty quiet on the Braves front right now. We'll get into that and much more. But of course, as always, I am with my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, good talking with you again, sir. Hope all has been well on your end.
Yeah, what's up, Shawn? Yeah, we're kind of in day 3 of the winter meetings. If you count Sunday as day 1, we had the big news with Soto, and then yesterday was pretty slow, and then today we had some fireworks kickoff, which is we were going to probably record a show tonight anyways, but the topic certainly changed, and you can probably tell if you're watching this by the title exactly what went down today. But yeah, it was kind of an end of an era in Braves country as Max Fried signs with the Yankees, and we're going to talk about it. And then there was another signing almost about an hour later that also impacted the Braves. So, yeah, a couple of fascinating moves that got done today that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is this, is that, Max Fried is a New York Yankee. And the thing that stands out to me is this, is that I think that the most surprising part of this was just how much Max Fried got. He signed an 8-year, $218 million deal with the New York Yankees. Now, first off, hats off to Max Fried. Congratulations to him. He certainly has the track record of a pitcher who you could, when you look at his numbers on paper, see him potentially getting 175 plus to 200 plus million when it happens. But I think what's not surprising is the fact that for years we kind of anticipated, probably Stephen, I think kind of after the year, probably after 2021, after he had won that World Series, even after 2022, each year it became more and more clear that he was going to be a free agent. Each year it became more and more clear that he probably was going to earn more than the Braves were going to be willing to pay him. And that certainly became true. But what I will say is this is no slight to Max Fried, but I am glad that if he earned 8 years and 218 million, it was another team paying him than the Braves.
Yeah, so a lot to get to here. First of all, we'll love Max forever. Max brought a World Series to the Atlanta Braves, and there's just only so many people that can say that. And Max was literally on the mound for Game 6 in Houston against the best lineup in baseball, and shoved to win a World Series. And that will be a memory I have for the rest of my life. Literally, I will remember that game for the rest of my life. And Max pitched it. And so for that, we are forever indebted to Max for what he did as Brave. He was kind of the poster child for the rebuild in a lot of ways, because he was one of the big prospects that they traded for. The Justin Upton trade was one of the first trades they made when they tore it all down, and Max Fried was the main piece that came back, and he was in the system during the rebuild, and then he came up as the Braves started getting good, and he eventually became, an ace of the team and eventually led them to a World Series. So forever indebted to Max Fried as a Braves fan, and I'll always love Max. I want to lead with that. But after that, after you get past that, I think this is probably an atrocious contract. 8 years and $218 million for a guy who's 31 years old, who's got elbow concerns, who's already had Tommy John in his career. I think it's probably going to end pretty badly. I'm extremely happy for Max that he got paid, because all he went through as a prospect, he was, because he had those injuries as a prospect, he was a late starter. He got to free agency late. And a lot of times for those guys, they really pay for it when they get to free agency, because they're already 31, 32, and they don't get this payday. And he hit the market at a perfect time where pitching is very expensive, and he got maximum dollars. Like, this is, if you ask Max Fried, what is like the 99th percentile outcome for him in free agency, this is it. This was as big a contract as he ever could have hoped for. And I am ecstatic for him that he got it. But in terms of value, in terms of baseball, this is probably an atrocious contract. Like, these are the exact kind of pitching contracts I want no part of. And I think you and I talked about it. Like, this is the exact contract I don't want the Braves to ever sign. And so am I happy for Max? I'm ecstatic for Max. Am I happy the Braves aren't the one doing this? I am, because, and this is an important point, the Yankees can make moves like this, and if it blows up in their face, they can just keep going. They can just keep going. They can just write it off and keep going, and it's not going to really affect what they do. The Braves can't, right? If the Braves sign this contract and it blows up, that hurts them every single year of this contract. And they don't have they're not at the Yankees level in terms of spending and financial freedom, where they can, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, these teams that they can sign these contracts. And if they blow up in their face, oh, well, it's a minor speed bump and they can keep going. The Braves don't have that luxury. The Braves have to be much smarter with their money, because a deal like this could cripple them for years. And so I'm ecstatic for Max. I'm incredibly happy for him. I'm also incredibly happy that the Braves are not the one that are on the hook for 8 years and $218 million on a 31-year-old pitcher with an iffy elbow.
Absolutely. And Max definitely seems to kind of follow the baseball trend where he's being paid now for what he did, probably at his peak, between, 6 and 2 years ago, but basically Max was kind of at his peak during the 2019 through 2022, I would say, season. I believe the 2022 season, he finished second in the Cy Young race. The thing that I will say, though, is that I definitely don't, to Steven's point, want to take away from the fact that Max Fried has been among the best arms that have ever taken the mound for the Braves, in my opinion.
Yep.
I mean this legitimately, and I don't mean to show my age in a young sense here, but when you go through the pitchers in Braves history, Smoltz, Glavine, Maddox, obviously, Phil Necro, as well as Warren Spahn, when you get past those top five, I think that Max Fried probably leads that next tier, maybe. There are probably other arms out there that you could put on that level. But when you talk about the peak that he had as a Brave, second again in National League Cy Young awards, the longevity that he had with the Braves, the fact that he had the playoff, he struggled in the playoffs at times, but he did win a World Series for us, literally being on the mound. That's, for an organization that's known for its pitching, that says a lot. But again, as much as he has stood out as being a success with the Braves, he is the most recent in a line of players that Alex Anthopoulos really did not want to have to pay for all that success that they previously had, because he just did not feel it was the best investment. We saw that happen with Freddie Freeman. We saw it happen with Dansby Swanson. We now have seen it happen with Max Fried. So everybody knew this was coming. Again, it's sad to see the era over, but I think that you can both appreciate and really cherish what you had with Max Fried, truly value what he was with the Braves, while also realizing for the future of the organization, this probably was the right move to let him get this payday elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's a little different than Freeman and Swanson, just because with Freeman, even after he became a free agent, we didn't know if they were going to sign him or not. And a lot of people thought even after he became a free agent, that they would sign him. And it wasn't until the day they traded for Matt Olson, basically, we learned that they're not signing Freddie Freeman. And even with Dansby, like, we kind of figured they weren't going to be in that shortstop market, but we didn't know they needed a shortstop. They very well could have been in that market, depending on what Dansby ended up getting. The Braves could have ended up being the team that signed him. So even that we didn't really know. This one we've known for a while. This one, like, it's just been understood. You and I had Buster Only on here back when we first started this podcast in May. He was one of our first guests, and he said very plainly that day that no one in the baseball expects Max Fried to go back to the Braves after 2024. And we've been operating under that understanding for more than a year now, honestly. So this should not come as a shock to anybody. And it was just going to find out what team he went to and how much money he got. And that's what we learned today. He went to the Yankees and he got a ton of money. He got $218 million over 8 years. That's like $27 million a year, I think. So, yeah, it's not stunning. We're going to talk here in a second about where the Braves go from here, but we did want to start out the podcast with appreciating Max for what he did, congratulating Max on getting this money, because that's a bag. He just got himself an absolute bag. I think the largest contract ever for a left-handed starter. I think I saw somebody tweet that, which is crazy if you think about it. And also, I did want to point out, as we both said, that I'm not terribly jealous. You know, if it had been a smaller deal, there probably would have been a contingent of Braves fans who've been like, man, I would have loved to sign Max at that deal. I don't know that there's going to be very many Braves fans that were just, hungry to give Max $218 million over 8 years. I think most people understand it's probably best that they're not the team to do this. But yeah, congrats to Max. I mean, I will literally be rooting for him every single time he takes the mound, unless it's against the Braves. I want nothing but success for him. He was a class guy the whole time he was here. And he helped win the Braves World Series. And honestly, that alone makes him a Braves legend, and he will never be forgotten by this fan base.
Nor as he shouldn't. Thank you for everything, Max. Wish you nothing but the best in New York, unless, hey, if we were to face you somewhere down the line in the playoffs. But in all joking aside, thank you for everything. Best of luck, and definitely hope that you make the most of your career moving forward. But speaking of moving forward, that's exactly where the Braves find themselves. And unfortunately, I feel like, we're starting to kind of find ourselves in that old Friends episode where Ross and Rachel and I think Chandler are going up the stairs with the couch, and Ross is saying, pivot. That's what I feel like this offseason is coming to for the Braves, because to your point, Stephen, as you had mentioned, Max Fried, yes, we expected for him to sign elsewhere. So we knew that we were going to have a big void to fill. Like the Braves, one thing I will say is this: the Braves without Max Fried are a worse team than that with Max Fried. But you can potentially find an arm that, at the very least can at times be that front of the rotation option. One name that we had consistently been linked to was Nathan Eovaldi. And the hope was that, the Braves could get him on a deal where they can get him maybe for a few years. 20 plus million seemed reasonable, and that may be an alternative that was much more feasible in terms of term and contract, but also had some postseason success. That no longer is on the table. Nathan Eovaldi, a 3-year, $75 million deal. It's similar to what we saw Sonny Gray sign last year with the St. Louis Cardinals. So you've seen back-to-back years in which, there were some veteran starters who could make sense for the Braves, that they signed that 3-year, $75 million deal that it just seems Alex was not comfortable with. Stephen, what is your takeaway? I feel like 3-year, $75 million is pretty reasonable for Nathan Eovaldi. Just seems like maybe that Alex Anthopoulos was not comfortable with that average annual value for that third year.
Yeah, I mean, like every other pitcher on the market, he got, a little to a lot more than what he was expected to get. The projection for him, I think, was like 360, 65, something like that, right around 21, 22 million. And he obviously got 375, 25 million a year. And yeah, I mean, clearly the Braves weren't interested at that price. I mean, I think they probably could have done it. They certainly have the payroll space to do it, but it got up to a number that Alex wasn't comfortable with. And now it's where it gets interesting, because there are a lot of pitchers off the market. I mean, you go through them. Obviously, Max and Eovaldi came off the market. Severino's already off the market. Michael Wacha's already off the market. Frankie Montas. There's been a bunch of, people have been aggressively signing pitchers. And if you look at who's left, in terms of like impact starters, you got Corbin Burns, who's going to get a massive amount of money that I don't think that anyone thinks the Braves are going to be involved in that. So you got Corbin Burns, then you got like Shawn Manaea, you got Nick Pivetta, you got Walker Buehler is a name that a lot of Braves fans are going to talk about just as an upside play, maybe a 1-year pillow deal that Alex loves to do. So, like you said, we're in pivot mode, because one of the Braves aces just walked out the door. And unfortunately for Braves fans so far, this offseason has been about what they've lost, because they traded away Soler, they non-tendered Griffin Canning and Laureano, they declined Travis d'Arnaud's option, Max Fried just walked out the door. Probably their top pitching target, Nathan Eovaldi, just signed with another team, and there really hasn't been anything to talk about other than what's walking out the door. And so Braves fans are very eager, and I'm one of them. I tweeted a bunch of stuff today joking around about how, Alex is just walking through the winter meetings, just swag shopping instead of making moves. But yeah, Braves fans are eager to get to the point of the offseason where we're actually talking about an addition of some sort versus a subtraction. And you look around the market and it's getting thin. And Brad and I talked about it last night about outfield and shortstop, how thin those markets are getting. Now starting pitchers getting super thin with two of the biggest names going off the board tonight. You know, obviously trades are always out there and trades are impossible to predict because there's too many names out there to really ever get it right. But, maybe we're to the point now where trades are more likely. The Braves don't have a ton of prospects. They have a couple of good ones that they could definitely move if they wanted to. But in terms of the free agent market, which is where Alex typically lives, it's getting late early, as they say. And some of their need areas, outfield, starting pitcher, shortstop, have thinned very, very quickly. And so I don't know, Alex has a plan, obviously, but if they don't make a move on somebody here very soon, they might just run out of names, quite honestly.
Yeah, and my initial thought is that again, the Braves are not going to pay Corbin Burns what he deserves. I in no way, shape, or form want them to pay Jack Flaherty what he probably feels he deserves. I am all for going to get Walker Buehler, especially if you could potentially get him at a bit of a lower cost. He's still young, younger than some of these veteran starters like a Sonny Gray or an Eovaldi or a Chris Sale. And so he's probably still has kind of a second surge in his career once he gets fully healthy. And the big thing for me that stands out, Stephen, is this. I know that Mark Bowman talked about, and I know that you and Brad talked about the idea of a Charlie Morton Max Kepler combination. Max Kepler as an outfielder is perfectly fine, but the Braves need to make a move that's going to impact the postseason, that they feel confident is going to impact the postseason. I feel that Alex Anthopoulos still sees a starting pitching addition as being that focus because we didn't get to see Chris Sale. We got to see what I believe one inning of Ronaldo Lopez on that Monday before the postseason. We didn't get to see either one of those additions in the postseason this year. He's now without Max Fried. And to me, going to get Charlie Morton this early in the offseason doesn't make sense. That's why I do have some interest in a Walker Buehler because we've seen him have postseason success. When we talk about trades, could for the second year in a row, Alex Anthopoulos go get a left-hander who's had postseason success, whose value is a bit down in Jordan Montgomery, who probably he could get him at a lower price, and the Braves could probably do well to fix him and see what they could do. I do think that a trade makes sense. If Walker Buehler to me is not there, if he's going to cost too much, then the trade probably makes sense. Do we go talk to the Yankees? Now is Nestor Cortez without a rotation spot? Just some different names that are out there. I think it makes sense to go get another left-hander. But when we talk about pivot, there's several different ways the Braves could go. The issue is that wherever they go, there's also heightened risk that they may not be able to replicate what they had with Max Fried moving forward. You're probably not going to find a Max Fried, but go find somebody who's had postseason success and you feel could have postseason success again. That still matters to me when it comes to adding an arm.
Yeah. And listen, the Braves will tell you that the number one option for replacing Max Fried next year is Spencer Strider, right? That's what the Braves will say is that, with Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Ronaldo Lopez, and Spencer Swallenbach, they've got a really good rotation. We've documented at length the different issues with each one of those names and why there's some questions around each one of those names and their production in 2025, which is why it's important to go get someone else. But yeah, I mean, they'll say that Strider is going to be the guy that steps in for Max, and the Braves will still have their two aces, and I'm sure that's what they're hoping for. But the reality is, when you're coming back from major elbow surgery like that, no one knows when you're coming back, and no one knows what you're going to be like when you get back. So they need to do something. Brad and I did talk about the Kepler Charlie Morton combination, and we kind of arrived at the conclusion that that's insufficient. That's an insufficient offseason. Like you said, that doesn't really impact the postseason. Morton's not going to pitch a postseason game for you, even if you bring him back. He's a fifth starter at this point in his career. So they need to go get somebody. I know if it's Sean Manaea or Pivetta, both had really good years last year. If it's a trade, if it's Garrett Crochet, if it's Jordan Montgomery, Kevin Gosman. There's a bunch of good teams that are trying to cut some payroll. So some trades that don't cost a ton in prospects, maybe, kind of like the Chris Sale trade last year, a guy whose debt value is down because of injury or underperformance, and you take a leap and see if you can get some value there. But they need to do something, and I would love for it to be like now, because we're approaching the middle of December, and all this team has done is subtract from last year's team, and you know options are getting thin quickly, and maybe trades are now much more of the possibility than they were before. But they need to do something. They need it. They still need an outfielder. They still need a starting pitcher, and they still need a reliever. And same needs that we've had all offseason, because they haven't made any additions yet. So um, I am I am anxiously awaiting that first big addition of the offseason.
Well, the other thing when we talk about, okay, if we quote unquote were to pivot into talking a bit more trade, Stephen, and we were to talk about looking at the arms that can make sense, let's look at some of the arms that are out there. We know that, Luis Castillo potentially could be an option that the Mariners are looking to trade, but what are they looking for? They're looking for bats. There's been rumors that when it comes to Garrett Crochet from the Chicago White Sox, we'd love to trade for him. The Braves have been rumored to have interest. They had interest in Dylan Cease, probably have had conversations with the White Sox about Garrett Crochet. What do they want? They want bats. We've heard the Astros may be willing to listen on Framber Valdez. I'm not sure if Valdez has 1 or 2 years left. But the Astros probably are looking, potentially to restock their outfield, especially if they don't think they're going to be able to hold on to Kyle Tucker. It just becomes interesting to me on a couple of fronts. Number one, if we were to trade, do we go after a controllable pitcher, or do we go after someone with 1 year left who we may feel we could get a good deal and extend them once we were to acquire them? And then the other thing that comes into play for me, Stephen, is that if we're seeing that the free agent market for pitchers is just out of the realm that we had thought it would be, where do AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurst and Waldrop enter into the equation? Is there value remaining in the system and being depth that eventually becomes a part of the rotation? Or do one of them potentially become more free to use to be able to go get a significant starting pitching upgrade? I would not trade personally either one of them unless we were getting a controllable starting pitcher. But it just opens up a bunch of questions. Like, what's the best route for this Braves team to go? I feel eventually they're probably going to find that adding a relevant to significant outfield bat is the way to go in free agency, and a trade for a pitcher makes sense. But if they're going to make that trade for a pitcher, do they go 1 year? Do they go, multiple years? Do they use one of their prize arms to get it? A lot of different questions as to what the best trade avenue to take actually is.
Yeah, and it's impossible. I mean, no one, not a single soul had Chris Sale going to the Braves last December. Not a soul. No one was talking about it. I know, because we talk about this stuff year round. And if anybody was talking about it, we would have known about it. We would have talked about it. We would have brought it up. Not a whisper about Chris Sale. And then, I think it was December 31st. I think it was the last day of the year last year. They traded for Chris Sale. So when you're talking about trades, it could be anybody. There's guys available we don't even know are available. Guys that teams aren't necessarily shopping out loud, but if you offer the right package, if you offer the right amount of salary relief, then all of a sudden the team is willing to do it. The Twins, Pablo Lopez is not publicly available, but if the Twins have to clear a certain amount of money, and the Braves offer something, who knows? I mean, there's names all over baseball. Jesus Luzardo was a name that was floated today about potentially being available. The Marlins have a couple guys, that potentially could be. I mean, there's just names everywhere. Trades are impossible to predict. So if they go that route, then the possibilities are somewhat endless, really. With free agents, it's very easy to tell because there's a list of them to start the offseason, and as they sign elsewhere, you just check them off the list. And that's what we're doing now. There's, probably half the decent starters on the free agent list to start the year have already signed with someone else. So, that's where the urgency comes from. But if they're going to do a trade, then it's much easier. And I am still 100% confident that they're going to add a starter, and I'm 100% confident they're going to add an outfielder. How good of a player those two players are, I don't know. I'm hoping it will be quality. Like you said, I'm hoping it's somebody that can affect a postseason series. I think that's a really good bar for the Braves that they need to clear on all their acquisitions and they talked about that last year with Chris Sale. They're getting him specifically to help in the postseason. And I think that's a good bar to clear. They need to go get a pitcher that can help in the postseason. They need to go get an outfielder that can play every day for them. And I think they still need a high leverage reliever on top of those two. So still the same shopping list as before. Trades are probably much more likely than they were when the offseason started, just because of the number of names that have come off. But we'll see. There's still names available in free agency if they want to go that route. Walker Buehler is probably pretty high on the list. Sean Manaea is probably a pretty interesting name, depending on what he ends up getting. But pitching has been so expensive that I wouldn't expect a bargain anywhere. Anywhere we thought maybe a bargain would be has not manifested itself so far. And Max just got 8 years and $218 million, which no one saw coming. So pitching is very expensive. Maybe a trade is the way to go, and we'll all find out together.
So then that makes me ask, when it comes to figuring out the best way to fill these multiple needs, because we also need some level of relevant reliever, I think, to be added as well. If Alex Anthopoulos has shown he's probably not in the tier of wanting to pay top dollar for one of these arms, and if Walker Buehler, for instance, makes Nathan Eovaldi money, do we know if the Braves are going to pay that? No, probably not. But it comes about value when you're going to go out in free agency. And I think that what we've seen is, the Michael Conforto deal that he signed with the Dodgers, I felt that was right in line with what the Braves have done. But I think that the value play may be in the outfield. And Stephen, I'm not sure how much thought you've given to, at what point do you potentially just sell out for offense? I know we traded that away with Jorge Soler in the 2 years, $28 million that was owed to him. But looking at a Jock Peterson, the bat, all bat, but a right-handed bat, which definitely is beneficial, something the Braves need. Could they survive with him a few months in left field? Potentially, or maybe a whole year, excuse me. Or a Jerickson Profar. Jerickson Profar stands out to me in a pretty intriguing fashion. He's got a bit of versatility, though the defense is not reliable at all. But I feel that his market may be a bit down. And if you could get him for 10 to 12 million per year for a few years, that's an upside bat that even you could bat at the top of your order. I bring this up. I know we're talking a lot about starting pitching, but I bring it up to say, I feel like that if Alex Anthopoulos is trying to find value through a free agent addition, an outfield addition is probably going to offer a much higher upside of that than a pitching addition when it comes to relevant names.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's just so many outfielders out there. I mean, especially when you add in trade targets. Jock, he hasn't played defense. He didn't play defense last year. He was full-time DH last year. They tried that with Soler. It went so poorly that I don't know if they're gonna jump in those waters again. I think they're probably gonna want somebody that can at least pretend to play defense. I do like Profar. I probably like Profar a little more than other people. His batted ball data was real last year. It wasn't just a fluky one-off season. He increased his exit velocity by like 5 miles an hour last year, which is unheard of. That's absurd, to go from an average of 86 miles an hour to an average of 91 miles an hour. That especially like in the 10th year of a guy's career, that's one of the biggest jumps I've ever seen. So, he obviously made a real effort to hit the ball harder. It made huge dividends on his production. That guy was a top prospect at one point in his career. So I think he was the number one prospect in baseball, if I remember correctly. We're going back a while now, but so yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I think he's better than Kelnick, and by default, he would be the second best outfielder on this team at the moment, and depending on when Acuna comes back. So I'd be fine with that. I think that's more realistic than Teoscar or Santander. I think both those guys are going to get massive paydays, quite honestly, because there's a lot of teams that missed out on Juan Soto that are looking for the next best outfielder, and I think both those guys are going to end up getting paid pretty good off of the wake of Juan Soto's deal. And so I think Profar is probably the most likely, and then you get into that next group of like Kepler and Verdugo and Jason Hayward, and we talked about those guys last night with Brad, but Yeah, once you add trades into the mix, the possibilities open up, all over the league. And so that's what I'm going to be interested to see is how the Braves address these needs. It could still be free agency, but trades are definitely more likely at this point than they were earlier. And if that's the case, it's hard. It's going to be hard to predict anything. I mean, Alex is just he can be so random with some of these moves. And, no one saw Kelnick coming last year. No one saw Chris Sale. No one saw Ronaldo Lopez, quite honestly, being a starter. They could still go that route with a Jeff Hoffman, somebody we're not even talking about. So there's still a lot of ways they can go. It's not like it's too late to do anything. It's just getting late early. There's a lot of names coming off the board very quickly. And if the Braves are going to jump in on some of these, then they got to get going. You're muted, Shawn.
Excuse me. The Braves have had a ton of success bringing in names that have had plenty of success when you compare them to their previous stops. But I think Braves fans are also getting a bit weary of, yes, it's great to keep hitting on these names that are a bit risky, but we get great reward from them in the regular season. We're ready to find some of these options that can really deliver for us in the postseason. Outside of Matt Olson, we've not really had the big addition that's helped us out in the postseason. Excuse me, Charlie Moore. Now I'll give him credit for that. But in the bullpen as well. But we've not really had the opportunity to see the Matt Olsons or the Sean Murphys or those additions, Marcelo Zunas, for instance. Outside of those homegrown talents, we've not really seen these additions that have added value truly in the postseason since 2021. I think the Braves fans are ready for that. What are we going to do to make a move to go get a guy who's going to elevate us to once again clearly be in that upper echelon of World Series contenders? On paper, we consistently are that, but it has not translated the past 3 years. What's the move out there that's going to help us get to that? And the options that could reasonably help us do that, they're becoming less and less reliable, I think, or they're becoming less and less full of certainty to be at that level. And I think that's what Braves fans rightfully are focused on.
Yeah, it's just a little. I mean, their Braves fans are just kind of antsy, right? It's just kind of idle hands or the devil's workshop is kind of the old saying. Like when you don't have anything to talk about, it gets negative quickly. And especially when you're watching other teams do stuff, when you're watching on the Mets, one of your biggest rivals sign the biggest free agent in history. You're watching your staff ace for the last few years sign with the Yankees. That doesn't help. That doesn't help at all. So I think it's just antsy. Once the Braves actually break the seal and make their first addition, a lot of that will calm down depending on who it is. But that's what we're waiting on now. We're waiting on Alex to make that first big addition of the offseason. I'm very surprised it hasn't happened yet. Alex typically works pretty quickly, but obviously this market is a bit heavier than normal. There's not a lot of value out there. It's a lot of market and above market deals, and that's certainly not Alex's strong suit. So he's probably having to wait, and I'm sure it's killing him inside. I'm sure he wants to have stuff done by now, but yeah, we're just waiting to see what they do.
And the good thing is that there's no better place for you to come back and listen to when it comes to what the Braves could potentially do. We will continue to talk about all the potential moves that are out there. Again, we can mention names all day long, but right now there's still just so many out there that it's hard really to deep dive into one or two. But the thing that I'll say is this, is that the more names that are out there, once again, the more likely it is Alex Anthopoulos is going to, do his usual and going to get a name that none of us talked about, but in the end does make plenty of sense. And hopefully it makes sense for the regular season and the postseason. But Stephen, anything else more for us as we wrap up this edition, honoring the legacy of Max Fried as an Atlanta Brave?
No, just one more shout out to Max.
Yep.
Incredibly happy for him. I mean, he waited so long to become a free agent like most major leaguers do. And his free agency went as good as he probably ever could have hoped for. I mean, like A1 outcome for him. Pitching in New York is going to be different, of course, and that media up there. And if he has bumps in the road, that could get tricky, but he got his payday and I'm happy for him. And I'm incredibly happy for him. I'm going to root for him like crazy. Big shout out to Max. Thanks for all the memories. It was a ton of fun. And for the Braves, let's get some moves going. Let's get some additions going because it's getting antsy out here. And for us who have to produce content, a little something to talk about would be much appreciated. So let's get a move on.
Yeah, I mean, before you know it, here in the next 2 weeks, Stephen, if we don't see really anything going on, we're just going to have to start pulling out those player reviews. I've got the 45-minute Luis Guillorme player review ready to go whenever we're ready to do it. So
It's
I'll be
coming.
glad to do that. I'll be glad to do that one with you, Stephen. Until next time, you can find Stephen Tolbert at B_outliers on X/Twitter, myself at StatsSAC on X/Twitter. Wherever you find Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, as well as Foul Territory. Proud to be a part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.